The Exilari Empire had never known defeat. For over 1,000 years, they had expanded across the galaxy, crushing every species that dared to resist them. Their warships, vast and unbreakable, descended upon planets like an unstoppable force of nature. Their soldiers, bred for war, carried weapons that could turn entire cities to dust. No civilization had ever stood against them for long. They had conquered the volcanic worlds of the Drak, where firestorms raged endlessly. They had broken the mighty fortress moons of the Vashar, whose warriors fought for every inch of ground. Even the monstrous Skarath, creatures with armored hides and claws that could rip through steel, had fallen before the might of the Xilari war machine. Their empire stretched across thousands of star systems, and every world they took became another link in their unbreakable chain. But now, they had set their sights on Earth. To the Xilari, Earth was just another primitive world, a blue-green planet filled with weak, short-lived creatures. Their spies had studied humans, and they saw nothing impressive. No biological enhancements, no advanced cybernetics, no genetic perfection. Humans were small, fragile, and slow compared to the Xilari. Their technology was outdated, their weapons primitive. The Xilari High Command expected an easy victory. Admiral Center stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Vorthak, the flagship of the invasion fleet. His glowing red eyes scanned the holographic display of Earth. His forces had already surrounded the planet, blocking all escape routes. A simple conquest, Zenter said, his voice filled with cold certainty. We will land our troops, crush their military, and bring Earth under our control within a week. His officers nodded. They had done this hundreds of times before. There was no reason to believe this invasion would be any different. The humans, like all the others, would kneel or die. The first wave of the invasion began. Xilari dropships roared through the atmosphere, descending upon major cities. The strategy was simple: strike fast, strike hard, and break humanity's will before they had a chance to resist. The streets of New York, Beijing, London, and Moscow trembled as massive war machines landed, releasing legions of Xilari soldiers. But something was wrong. The humans did not behave like the other species the Xilari had conquered. They did not panic and surrender. They did not flee in terror. Instead, they fought back with a ferocity the Xilari had never seen before. Tanks rolled into battle, firing shells that shattered Xilari armor. Fighter jets screamed across the sky, weaving through the air with impossible maneuvers. Snipers took down alien commanders with deadly precision. But it wasn't just the military. Civilians, ordinary men and women, took up arms. They set traps, ambushed patrols, and turned every street into a war zone. The Xilari were confused. This was not how conquests were supposed to go. Their enemies were supposed to break, to beg for mercy. But the humans were different. They refused to give up. Reports flooded in. Entire Xilari squads had been wiped out in ambushes. Their war machines, designed for open battle, were struggling in the tight urban environments. The humans used their own terrain against them, striking from shadows, vanishing before the Xilari could react. Admiral Center clenched his fists as he watched the battle unfold on the holographic display. "Impossible," he muttered. "They should have fallen by now." But the humans were just getting started. The invasion of Earth had begun. The Xilari believed they were unstoppable. They had never been proven wrong, until now. The Xilari had made a fatal miscalculation. They had assumed Earth would fall like every other world, that humanity would break under the weight of their invasion. But as the battle raged, it became clear that this war was unlike anything the Empire had faced before. Admiral Centaur watched the chaos unfold on the holographic map. Red markers representing Xilari forces were disappearing faster than they should have. He zoomed in on one of the major battle zones, New York City. "Commander Vorak," Centaur barked, opening a communication channel. "Your forces should have secured the city by now. What is the delay?" The screen flickered, and Vorek's face appeared. His black armor was scorched, and his breathing was heavy. Behind him, explosions flashed, and alien screams echoed through the comms. The humans, they fight like no species we've ever faced, Vorek growled. They do not retreat. They do not surrender. They are everywhere. Zenter narrowed his eyes. You have superior technology, superior firepower. This should not be possible. Vorek ducked as a rocket exploded behind him. They adapt too quickly. They are using their own cities as weapons. We lose soldiers to traps. Bombs hidden in buildings, snipers waiting in shadows. And it's not just their military. The civilians fight, too. They err. The feed cut off. Zentar clenched his fists. This was unacceptable. He turned to his tactical officer. Deploy orbital bombardment. If they will not surrender, we will burn their cities to the ground. The officer hesitated. Admiral, the humans are broadcasting live feeds of the battle across their networks. If we destroy their cities, we risk turning the entire population against us. Zentar's patience was running thin. They are already against us, he snapped. But the officer was right. The Xilari had fought many enemies before, but never one that could manipulate information so effectively. Humanity was using its own media to spread messages of defiance. Soldiers and civilians alike posted footage of Xilari forces being ambushed, defeated, humiliated. And worse, they were learning. Zenter watched a recording of a human pilot weaving through enemy fire with unnatural precision. His fighter was outnumbered, outgunned, but he didn't just fight. He predicted the enemy's movements, dodging plasma blasts by the narrowest margins before unleashing devastating counterattacks. Sir, another officer reported, we have evidence that the humans are studying our weapons, reverse engineering them. Some of their soldiers have already modified our plasma rifles for their own use. Zenter's blood ran cold. This was not normal. Every species the Xilari had conquered took years to understand their technology. The humans were doing it in hours. Then came another report. Our forces in South America have been wiped out. Zenter turned sharply. What? An entire battalion gone. The survivors report. Unconventional warfare. The humans don't fight fair. Admiral, they fight to win. Zenter finally understood. The Xilari had not invaded another primitive world. They had invaded something else entirely. Earth was not a conquest. It was a mistake. Zenter stood frozen as the reports flooded in. Every battlefront told the same story. Humanity was not just resisting. They were winning. The Xilari Empire had always believed in overwhelming force. Every world they conquered had fallen the same way. A swift orbital assault, targeted strikes to cripple resistance, then a ground invasion to secure dominance. It had worked for centuries. But Earth was different. The first sign of disaster had come from the ruins of a city they had bombed. The humans should have been demoralized, broken. Instead, they had become something far worse. Angry. Their military was relentless. Their weapons were crude but devastating. Their tactics unpredictable. And their soldiers, they refused to die easily. A Xilari soldier shot a human in the chest, only for the wounded warrior to keep fighting. Entire squads of humans charged into certain death just to take down a few invaders with them. Then came the unexpected. The humans were stealing Xilari technology. In one intercepted broadcast, a group of human engineers had dismantled a Xilari plasma rifle, laughing as they figured out how to make it better. Within hours, human snipers were using plasma rounds against their own troops. Reports from the ground were worse. Our patrols keep going missing. An officer reported, voice filled with unease. No signs of battle. Just gone. Zenter's mandibles twitched. Explain. The officer hesitated before continuing. We reviewed the footage. The humans are using their forests, their mountains, their own ruins as weapons. They wait in the shadows. They strike from nowhere. And when they do, they leave no survivors. Zenter clenched his fists. He had seen ruthless enemies before, but the humans were more than ruthless. They were strategic. Even worse, they were united. Most species under attack splintered. Some surrendered. Others fought. Many tried to escape. But Earth had become one. Nations that had been at odds for centuries now shared weapons, soldiers, information. The entire planet had turned into a war machine. And then the final blow came. A desperate retreating Sci squadron had tried to take shelter in a captured human base. They had sent a distress call. The reply was chilling. It was not a human general who answered. It was a civilian. An old man standing in front of a burning Sci warship, holding a rifle far too advanced for someone of his status. He spoke with a calm certainty. "You should never have come here." The transmission ended. Minutes later, that entire squadron disappeared. Zenter felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Earth was not just a war zone. It was a trap. And the Sci had walked right into it. Zenter's claws trembled as he watched the battle unfold. It was supposed to be a simple war. Earth was a primitive world, its people divided. The conquest should have been swift. But now, the impossible was happening. The mighty Sci Empire was losing. The orbital fleet had been crippled. At first, it was due to Earth's crude yet effective missile systems, striking from hidden silos. Then, something worse had happened. The humans had learned. They started targeting weak points in the Sci shields. They used stolen energy weapons against the invaders. And they were adapting at a speed that terrified even the greatest minds of the Empire. On the ground, the war had become a nightmare. Sci soldiers no longer patrolled the cities. They feared the ruins. Buildings collapsed on command. Traps lured squads into ambushes, and shadows moved with deadly intent. No enemy fought like this before. The humans used the land, the night, and even their own deaths as weapons. A commander rushed into the war room, his pale skin darker with soot and dirt. "We've lost control of Sector 7. The humans wiped out our command post." Zenter's voice was sharp. "How?" The commander swallowed hard. "They used their own wounded as bait. We detected life signs and assumed it was a helpless squad. But when we moved in to secure the area, they detonated their own bodies." Silence. The Sci did not understand such sacrifice. Their soldiers fought to win. Humans fought to destroy their enemy, even at the cost of their own lives. Zenter turned back to the battlefield reports. One by one, the remaining strongholds of the Sci Empire on Earth were falling. The humans were not just fighting. They were hunting. He watched a live feed from one of the last operational outposts. It was a standard garrison, surrounded by high-tech defenses. But it meant nothing. The cameras caught blurry figures moving in the fog. Then, a loud explosion. The feed cut out. Zenter clenched his fists. This wasn't a war anymore. It was a massacre. The Sci Empire had never known defeat. But now, for the first time in history, they were outmatched, outgunned, outwitted. Zenter made the call. "Prepare the evacuation ships. We're leaving this cursed world." But deep down, he already knew the truth. The humans wouldn't let them escape. The evacuation order spread through the Sci ranks like wildfire. Soldiers, officers, and engineers scrambled to reach the remaining ships. The once invincible conquerors had been reduced to desperate fugitives, fleeing from a species they had underestimated. Zenter stood on the bridge of the last operational command vessel, his claws digging into the armrest of his chair. The humans had cut off nearly every escape route. Only a handful of transports had made it off the surface, and even those were being hunted down. A distress call crackled over the comms. "This is transport vessel Solixen. We're under attack. They're everywhere." They. Static. Then silence. Zenter closed his eyes. Another ship lost. Another failure. "Commander," an officer spoke, his voice trembling. Our orbital defenses are collapsing. The humans have. An explosion shook the ship. Sirens wailed. Red warning lights flashed across the control panels. The humans had found them. Shields at 30%. Another officer shouted. They're projectiles. They're too fast. Center gritted his teeth. The humans had no advanced plasma weapons, no energy-based firepower. Yet their missiles tore through auxiliary ships like they were nothing. Every tactic, every defensive measure the Empire had perfected over centuries was useless here. A new transmission came through. This time, from the humans. A face appeared on the screen. It was a human general, scarred, battle-worn, his eyes burning with something Center had never seen before. Rage. You came to our world thinking we were weak, the human said. His voice was calm, yet every word carried the weight of a death sentence. You thought you could conquer us like you did to countless others, but you never asked yourselves one question. The general leaned forward. What happens when the prey fights back? The transmission ended. Center's blood ran cold. He turned to his officers. Divert all power to engines. We need tow. Another explosion. The ship lurched violently, metal screeching as the hull was torn apart. Fires erupted, systems failed, and the once mighty command vessel of the auxiliary empire began its final descent toward the planet below. As Center's vision blurred, he had one last thought before darkness consumed him. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for vengeance. The wreckage of the once mighty auxiliary fleet now littered Earth's atmosphere, burning like falling stars. Ships that had once terrorized entire galaxies were reduced to smoldering debris, crashing onto the surface below. The sky was painted in fire and destruction. Center's vision blurred as he staggered through the ruined corridors of his shattered command vessel. Emergency sirens howled. The ship trembled under the force of gravity, its structure failing. He had to get to the escape pods, if there were any left. A group of auxiliary soldiers ran past him in panic. Trained warriors of the Empire, now nothing more than terrified prey. Commander, an officer called out, dragging a wounded comrade. The escape pods. Most are destroyed. We need tow. A deafening explosion cut him off. The corridor behind them collapsed, sucking soldiers into the void of space. Center barely managed to hold on, his claws digging into the twisted metal. The atmosphere depressurized, pulling everything out into the darkness. Then, the emergency doors slammed shut. The ship groaned, stabilizing for only a moment before another impact sent shockwaves through the hull. Center forced himself to his feet. His body ached, his armor cracked. He had seen planetary wars, massacres, and rebellions, but never had he felt this. Doom. Stumbling forward, he reached a viewport. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The human fleet was there, waiting, silent, unforgiving. They hadn't just repelled the invasion. They had annihilated it. The last auxiliary warships were being hunted down, their escape attempts crushed. No reinforcements would arrive. No rescue was coming. The auxiliary empire, an unstoppable force across the stars, was now helpless before a species they had mocked as primitive. Center clenched his fists. How had this happened? The answer was obvious now. The humans did not fight for conquest, for resources, or for honor. They fought because they refused to be conquered. They fought like a species that had spent its entire history surviving against impossible odds. They fought as if they had nothing to lose. The ship's structure groaned. The last warning sirens blared. It was over. As the auxiliary commander braced for the inevitable, he whispered his final thought. We were the conquerors, but Earth was our grave. Then, fire consumed the sky. Center's escape pod crashed violently into the Earth's surface, tearing through the ruined battlefield like a meteor. Smoke and fire surrounded him as he pried open the hatch, stepping onto the soil of the planet his empire had sought to conquer. His legs trembled, his armor cracked, and his body screamed in pain. but he was alive. Around him, the remains of the once mighty auxiliary forces lay scattered, broken beyond recognition. Burning wreckage smoldered under the darkened sky. The sounds of battle had faded, replaced by an eerie silence. And then, from the shadows, they emerged. Humans. Their weapons were aimed at him, their eyes cold, calculating. These were no mere soldiers. These were warriors, hunters, survivors. They had taken down the greatest empire in the galaxy, and now they stood before its last survivor. Zenter clenched his fists. He could fight, but for what? There was no fleet left, no reinforcements, no empire. A human stepped forward, his uniform tattered but his stance firm. The leader, his voice was steady as he spoke. Sci. Zenter lifted his chin, forcing himself to meet the human's gaze. You came here thinking we were weak, the human continued. You thought Earth would fall like every other world. He gestured to the destruction around them. This is what happens when you underestimate humanity. Zenter exhaled sharply. He had known defeat before, but this was not just a loss. This was the death of everything he had believed in. What now? Zenter rasped. His voice was hoarse, filled with the weight of a fallen empire. The human studied him for a long moment, then lowered his weapon. The others followed. You lost. The words were simple, but absolute. Now you decide what comes next. Zenter stood motionless. Surrender had never been in his nature, but there was no empire left to fight for, no home to return to. He had come to Earth as a conqueror. Now he was nothing more than a survivor. The war was over, and Earth had won.